Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's a certain expectation of precision, right?
Absolutely. It's very cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think of it like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is.
Right. The bone is either broken or it isn't.
Exactly. It's incredibly clean. And we as humans, we find a lot of comfort in things that are visible and tangible, things you can easily categorize into boxes. But then you step into the world of human loss, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Yeah, it really is.
You're staring at a landscape that is murky, confusing, and it just lacks any clear diagnostic boundaries.
It becomes the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, the body and the mind are reacting so intensely, but there is no simple scan to show what's actually happening under the surface.
Right. And that is exactly what we are navigating today. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a pretty hefty stack of sources, including current psychological research, guidelines from major health organizations, and this incredibly compassionate, beginner-friendly guide to dealing with grief.
It's a really fantastic set of materials.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to strip away all those overwhelming societal expectations of how you're quote-unquote supposed to grieve. We're going to uncover some very practical, immediate steps to navigate loss one day at a time without you feeling totally drowned in information or emotion.
Which is so needed right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's unpack this. What I found so deeply refreshing about this source material is how it treats the entire subject. Because society tends to treat grief like a project to be completed,
Oh, entirely. Like a checklist.
Right, like a puzzle that you need to solve by tomorrow morning. You're handed a metaphorical workbook and basically told to get over it. But this guide explicitly flips that expectation on its head. It gives you permission to just not solve your grief all at once.
Well, and looking at the larger context of how we live, this societal pressure makes perfect sense. In our hyper-productive, fast-paced world, we overcomplicate deeply human experiences by trying to force them into like a corporate timeline.
Yeah, we want a deliverable.
Exactly. We want a deliverable. We want a clear end date. And grief just fundamentally rejects that framework. I mean, it is a full system response that affects your mind, your physical body, your daily routine, your identity, and even your foundational worldview.
Wow. Yeah, it hits everything.
It really does. And when you dive into the clinical data, people can experience the exact same kind of loss and respond to it in wildly different, totally unpredictable ways.
Which means, I guess, before we can even figure out how to navigate the early days of a loss, we first have to dismantle some incredibly harmful myths about what grief is actually supposed to look like, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And the biggest myth, the one that permeates every movie and book, is the concept of the 5 stages of grief. We all know them. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Right, the classic 5.
Yeah. Culturally, we treat those stages like a mandatory checklist you just have to complete to graduate from grieving.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how the American Psychological Association views those stages today compared to their origin.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, those 5 stages were originally observational. They were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to describe the experiences of patients who were facing their own terminal illness.
Wait, their own terminal illness? Not the people left behind.
Exactly, not the people left behind. Culturally, they kind of morphed into this rigid, mandatory sequence for grieving families. But the current psychological consensus makes it very clear that stage models of grief are completely nonlinear. The human brain just does not process loss in a straight line.
So it's a lot messier than a checklist.
Oh, much messier. Your experiences overlap. They return weeks later. They happen completely out of order. Or you might skip some entirely. You could feel a profound sense of peace about a death, perhaps after a long, grueling illness, and still ache physically from their absence at the exact same moment.
Wow. Yeah, so it is definitely not climbing a staircase where you leave one step behind to firmly plant your foot on the next. A better way to conceptualize it, I think, is comparing it to weather.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like you don't have a week of only rain followed by a week of only sun. Grieving is like a day where it is incredibly sunny and pouring down freezing rain at the exact same time.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Emotions that seem entirely contradictory just exist together in the same hour. But let me push back on this a little bit. If there's no sequence, no checklist, and no quote-unquote right way to grieve, how does someone know they aren't just stuck? Without a map of stages, aren't you just wandering in the woods indefinitely?
That's a really valid point. And that fear of being stuck is exactly what drives people to seek out those rigid checklists in the first place. But the source text offers a brilliant resolution to this anxiety. It argues that the goal isn't to ask yourself, am I grieving the right way?
Because that's basically grading yourself.
Exactly. That specific question is rooted entirely in judgment and performance. It forces you to grade yourself. Instead, the question you should ask is, what am I experiencing today, and what would help me carry it safely?
What would help me carry it safely?
Right. Notice the shift in mechanics there. It turns your focus away from an arbitrary finish line and directs it entirely toward immediate practical care for your nervous system.
That is a massive paradigm shift. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the guide argues that in those early days of loss, your priority shouldn't actually be deep emotional processing at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, your immediate priority has to be basic physical and cognitive survival.
And the biology of early grief demands that survival approach. When a major loss occurs, it triggers the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your brain perceives the loss as a massive threat to your survival, flooding your system with stress hormones. And consequently, resources are pulled away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for executive function, planning, decision-making. Your cognitive capacity literally plummets.
It is exactly like a computer that has way too many tabs open. The background processing required just to understand that the loss has happened takes up like 99% of your CPU.
It really does.
So if someone casually asks you, what do you want for dinner? Or which utility bill needs paying this week? Your system just crashes. You literally do not have the processing power to answer a simple question. So the guide essentially says we have to forcefully close some of those tabs to keep the machine running.
Yeah, and the text provides some highly tangible mechanisms to bypass that overloaded prefrontal cortex.
Right. The lists are a perfect example of this. The guide suggests abandoning your normal, ambitious to-do list entirely and replacing it with two very specific tools. The first is the essential now list.
Which is incredibly short.
Yeah, it's just the bare biological and legal minimum. We're talking about calling the funeral home, making sure the dog is fed, and notifying your employer. That is it.
And the counterpart to that is the later list, which serves a brilliant psychological function.
Yeah, you put literally everything else on it. And the beauty of the later list is that it gives your mind physical permission to stop holding on to all those swirling responsibilities.
Just getting it out of your head.
Exactly. By writing it down on paper, your brain receives the signal that the task won't be forgotten, allowing you to actually let it go. And if even making a list feels like too much CPU power, the guide introduces the next three things approach. You do not plan your week. You don't even plan your afternoon.
Right, just immediate steps.
Yeah, you just ask, what are the next three reasonable things I need to do right now? It could be as simple as drink a glass of water, call my sister, and step into the shower.
Yeah.
Once those three are done, you pick three more. It forcibly stops the mind from trying to live an entire month in one single exhausting afternoon.
And creating that microscopic focus has a deep biological necessity. Building a simple daily frame, waking up, eating a piece of toast, stepping outside for 10 minutes, taking a shower. It's not about attempting to be productive.
Right.
When you lose someone central to your life, your external structure disappears. The day feels shapeless, chaotic, and fundamentally unsafe. A simple routine acts as a literal container for the day. Taking care of your basic biology isn't a strategy for avoiding your grief. It is the process of building the solid ground that you're going to stand on while the grief does its heavy lifting.
Yeah, you have to lay that foundation first, because once that physical baseline is somewhat stabilized, the emotional waves are inevitably going to hit. And the next critical step the guide explores is learning how to process those waves without compounding the raw pain through self-judgment.
That's where things get really tricky.
It does. The text leans heavily into the concept of permission.
Allowing yourself that permission is central to short-circuiting the suffering that we often layer on top of our pain.
Yeah, it grants permission to cry at the drop of a hat in the grocery store. But equally, it gives permission to be totally numb. Or, controversially, permission to feel relief.
That's a big one.
Yeah, the text specifically calls out the experience of caregiving for someone through a long, agonizing illness. When they finally pass, your first profound emotion might actually be relief that the suffering is over. And then, a split second later, a crushing wave of guilt hits you for feeling relieved in the first place.
Guilt is perhaps the most insidious trap in the entire grieving process. People will sit in a room and obsessively replay every medical decision made over a 5-year period. They analyze the final conversation they had, agonizing over whether they should have noticed a vague symptom sooner.
Oh, I'm sure that's so common.
It is. The psychological mechanism at play here is retrospective bias. Most of this guilt comes from looking backward with information, test results, and emotional clarity that you simply did not possess in the moment you had to make the decision.
Yeah, hindsight is 20/20, but the grieving brain uses that perfect vision as a weapon to punish you.
Exactly. And to interrupt that repetitive cycle of self-punishment, the guide introduces 3 grounding questions you must ask yourself when the guilt spirals.
Okay, what are they?
1. What did I actually know in that exact moment? 2. What was realistically within my control given the circumstances? And 3. What would I say to a person I love dearly if they were sitting across from me, blaming themselves for this exact same thing?
Wow, that third question is incredibly confronting. We are infinitely crueler to our own minds than we would ever be to a friend.
Without a doubt.
But, let me play devil's advocate regarding how we handle these emotional waves. There is a section that gave me pause. The guide talks about giving yourself permission to take breaks from the pain. It recommends intentional distractions, like watching a familiar sitcom, doing a crossword puzzle, playing with a pet.
Right.
But think about how that actually feels. Imagine you're sitting on the couch watching a comedy for the first time in weeks. You laugh out loud, and for a minute you forget. Doesn't actively stopping your grief, even for an hour, feel like a massive betrayal to the person you lost? Aren't people terrified that if they stop hurting, they will lose their connection to the person entirely?
That fear of betrayal is incredibly common. But the guide counters it with a profound piece of psychological wisdom. Love is not maintained by constant pain.
Love is not maintained by constant pain.
Right. Your nervous system is a biological entity. It requires moments of rest and discharge from intense emotional processing. If you do not take breaks, you'll burn out entirely. Laughing at a sitcom or enjoying a peaceful walk does not erase a memory, does not indicate that your love is fading. It means you are allowing your physical body to survive the immense toll of the loss, so you actually have the energy to continue honoring their memory tomorrow.
That is a sentence worth writing on a sticky note and putting on the mirror. Grieving doesn't happen in a vacuum, though. Even if you want to just sit in your living room and process these waves, eventually the outside world intrudes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, you have well-meaning friends texting you, and then you have the cold, hard reality of legal paperwork. Both require a totally different set of tools. The social paradox of grief is striking. You are surrounded by people checking in on you, yet you feel more isolated than ever before.
The isolation stems from a communication breakdown. I mean, the people around you desperately want to help, but very few people have the vocabulary or the understanding to know what actually helps a grieving brain.
Which explains why that universal phrase, "let me know if you need anything," is fundamentally terrible for a grieving person. It sounds supportive, but it operates perfectly backward.
It places the burden of project management squarely on the person whose prefrontal cortex is already offline.
Exactly. The browser tabs are completely maxed out, and now I have to invent a job for you to do, figure out your schedule, and manage your feelings while you do it. It's impossible.
It's way too much.
The source recommends a much better strategy. Keeping a specific help list on your phone. You populate it with tiny actionable things like, I need someone to walk the dog on Tuesdays, or I need someone to drop off a dinner in a disposable container that doesn't need to be cooked or returned.
That's so practical.
Right. I need someone to just sit silently in the room with me while I make these horrible phone calls. When someone says, let me know what you need, you don't have to think. You just look at the list and assign a specific task.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, major health organizations studying trauma stress that social support is critical for long-term recovery. However, they emphasize that support must come from trusted sources who respect your current capacity.
Because not all help is actually helpful.
Exactly. Setting boundaries becomes a vital survival skill. It is perfectly acceptable and necessary to tell people, I do not want advice right now, I just need you to listen. Or, I am not ready to sort through their closet, please do not bring it up again. You're even allowed to say, I appreciate you coming over, but I need this visit to end in 10 minutes.
I love that. You are allowed to aggressively protect your space. But navigating friends is hard enough. Then you face the literal administration of death.
The paperwork.
The paperwork. The guide suggests creating a grief administration folder, whether that is a physical accordion folder or a secure digital drive. You are suddenly dealing with unfamiliar tax laws, closing digital accounts, routing death certificates to various agencies, fighting with life insurance claims. I mean, imagine holding a death certificate while a customer service rep cheerfully asks you for a 4-digit PIN number you don't know.
It's awful.
Yeah.
You are being hit with a mountain of dense bureaucracy at the exact biological moment you are least equipped to comprehend it.
It is like being forced to learn a complex new language while simultaneously taking a final exam that you didn't even get to study for. The stakes feel incredibly high, you don't know the vocabulary, and if you mess up, there are financial consequences.
It's incredibly daunting.
The advice here is to break the administration down into microscopic pieces. Keep meticulous, dated notes of who you talked to and what they said. And crucially, the guide emphasizes deferring any major financial or life choices. Do not sell the house. Do not move across the country. Do not make massive life changes in those early days, because your brain is basically telling you everything is an emergency.
And that sense of emergency is an illusion manufactured by your stress response.
Really? How so?
Well, when you are on the phone trying to close a digital account and hitting a roadblock, the cortisol and adrenaline flooding your system trick your brain into reacting as if you're being chased by a tiger. It feels like life or death, even though it's just a bank account.
Wow, just biology working against you.
Completely. Intentionally slowing down the administrative process and deferring decisions for 6 months or a year is a profound form of self-protection. It hacks the nervous system, signaling that there is no immediate tiger, which brings your baseline stress levels back down.
Okay, so once that immediate crisis is handled, the tiger is gone, and the paperwork mountain is slowly getting chipped away, the internal question begins to shift. It evolves from, how do I literally survive this Tuesday, to how do I actually live the rest of my life now?
The long-term perspective.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for the long term? This brings us to a highly debated topic in the guide: the concept of closure. The source argues firmly against the idea of closure. It points out that closure implies sealing a relationship away in a neat little box, closing the lid, and walking away so it never affects you again.
Which just isn't realistic.
Right. Instead, it advocates for a psychological process called integration and building a continuing bond.
Yes. The goal of grieving is not to leave the person behind or sever the attachment. Healing is not forgetting. From a neurological standpoint, integration is the process of taking the memories and the relationship, which currently feel like an active physical presence that is painfully missing, and translating them into an internal bond.
An internal bond.
Right. A continuing bond means actively finding ways to keep an internal connection to the person through your values, your daily rituals, or your actions.
And the guide offers a highly tangible exercise to start building this bond. It suggests making 2 very different lists. The first list is what I miss. This honors the absence, acknowledging the raw pain of what is gone forever. But the second list is what I carry forward.
Oh, love that exercise.
It's incredibly moving. It could be a specific skill they taught you, a weird family recipe, their specific sense of humor, or the generous way they always treated strangers. You actively extract a piece of their character and intentionally integrate it into your continuing life.
It's beautiful.
It really is. And this philosophy applies powerfully to sorting belongings, too. The guide has a brilliant piece of advice for the agonizing task of going through their things. Create an undecided box.
That removes the paralyzing pressure of permanence. You are not forced to decide whether to keep an item forever or throw it away forever on a random Tuesday.
Right, not every object requires a permanent, agonizing decision right this second. Put the sweater in a box labeled undecided, tape it shut, and put it in the garage for 6 months. The text offers a vital reminder. Objects are just symbols. They are not the relationship itself. You do not have to hoard every single receipt and t-shirt to prove to the world that you loved them.
That's such an important distinction.
But I want to push back on the emotional reality of moving forward. What about when joy finally does return? The source mentions that people feel immense, complicated guilt for laughing genuinely, for going on a date a year later, or for creating a new holiday tradition that simply doesn't include the person who died. How do you reconcile building a new life with honoring the memory of the person who isn't there to see it?
Navigating that guilt is really the crux of transitioning into long-term healing. And the expert consensus provides a powerful reframe for this exact dilemma. Pain is not a payment you owe to the person who died. Love is not measured by the depth of your permanent suffering.
That's so powerful.
Think about the person you lost. If the relationship was truly loving and supportive, would that person demand that your life becomes smaller, darker, and devoid of joy as proof that you cared about them?
No. Assuming it was a healthy relationship, they would want you to actually live.
Right. The future is irrevocably changed. But a changed future can still contain deep purpose It can contain new meaningful relationships, and it can absolutely contain laughter.
Yeah.
It is also important to note that adapting to this new reality is incredibly hard work, and sometimes the brain really struggles to make that transition. Health organizations recognize a condition called prolonged grief disorder.
I've heard of that. How is that different from just regular grief?
Well, this isn't just grieving for a long time. I mean, grief always lasts. Prolonged grief disorder is a specific structural issue where the brain's predictive models cannot update. The intense, disabling grief extends far beyond what is typical, trapping the person in a maladaptive loop that completely prevents them from functioning in their daily life.
So it's when the system just truly gets stuck. And the guide makes it explicitly clear that recognizing when you are caught in that loop and needing professional help, whether that is finding a therapist, joining a specialized support group, or speaking to a doctor, is not a failure of character.
It is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It is a courageous, necessary step. Seeking professional help is you recognizing that the structural load is too heavy to carry alone, and you are taking an active biological role in your own adaptation process.
Absolutely. So to bring this all together for you listening, dealing with grief does not start with formulating a grand master plan for how you will survive the rest of your life. You do not have to carry the weight of the whole future today. Your only job is to care for the person you are in this exact moment.
Yes, just the moment.
Drink a glass of water,
Yeah.
make the essential only list, forgive yourself for not functioning at 100%. Just take the next reasonable, compassionate step.
And as you take those microscopic steps, remember that healthy grieving does not mean fighting to return to the untouched, unbroken version of yourself.
Right.
That previous version of you no longer exists. Grieving is the gradual, often messy, biological and emotional development of an entirely new life. It is building a life that fully acknowledges the heavy reality of what happened, but still allows you to actively and joyfully participate in what remains.
It is a profound shift in how we view recovery, which brings me right back to where we started. We talked about how a medical X-ray is clean and binary, the bone is broken or unbroken. Grief isn't an X-ray. It is an ongoing, messy, beautiful process of living.
Well said.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, something that builds on everything we've explored today. If the source material is right, and grief is essentially just love with nowhere to go, how might you gently reshape your physical environment today? Not to move on, and certainly not to erase the person, but how can you give that lingering, heavy love a new active place to live in your daily routine?
A beautiful question to carry forward.
Take care of yourselves today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.